Hey everyone, and welcome back to the FAQ Shock. This is the show where we tackle your biggest questions, and today we're diving into a topic that came straight from you guys. We're going to peel back the velvet curtain on the British royal family, looking past all the pomp and circumstance to get into the really dark, really controversial stuff.
So, the question that kicked this all off comes from Alex in Manchester. Alex asks, beyond the fairy tales and pageantry, what are the darkest, most controversial chapters in the modern royal family's history? Wow, what a question, Alex. It really gets right to the point, doesn't it? It's all about how this ancient institution has managed to weather some pretty insane storms. So let's get into it. And hey, if you've got a burning question you want us to tackle, drop it in the comments below.
All right, first up, the Windsor problem. And the question here is, an allegiance to whom? We're starting with what is, honestly, probably the most serious allegation you could ever level against a royal. We're talking about potential treason.
So picture this. It's May 1945. The war in Europe is basically over, and Allied troops stumble upon an absolute treasure trove, or maybe a Pandora's box, of secret Nazi documents. I mean, 400 tons of them. But here's where it gets weird. When these files get back to the UK, the government, led by Churchill and with King George VI's blessing, buries them. They are totally suppressed until 1957, and even then, they only came out because people wouldn't let it go. The big question is, what on earth were they trying to hide?
Well, inside those files was the truth about something called Operation Willy. This was a Nazi plot from back in 1940, and the target was none other than the Duke of Windsor. You know, the guy who'd been King Edward VIII before he abdicated. The plan was, frankly, insane. The Nazis wanted to convince him, or maybe even kidnap him, and get him to side with Germany. The endgame put him back on the British throne as their own puppet king after they won the war. Just wow.
But it gets even worse. The most shocking allegation, which you can see right here, is that the Duke encouraged relentless bombing attacks on the United Kingdom in a bid to force the British government to begin peace negotiations. Let that sink in for a second. The accusation is that a former King of England encouraged the bombing of his own people. It's hard to imagine a bigger betrayal.
Okay, so we're shifting gears now. From a massive world stage scandal to something much quieter, much more personal, and in its own way, just as horrifying. This is about a secret shame, the story of the hidden cousins. So, back in 1941, two young women named Nerissa and Catherine Bowes-Lyon were quietly sent away to a hospital for people with learning disabilities. Now, these weren't just any women. They were Queen Elizabeth II's first cousins. And their admission to this hospital, well, that was just the first step in a plan to basically erase them from history. And here's the proof of that erasure. This is absolutely wild. The official record for the aristocracy, a book called Burke's Peerage, listed them both as dead. As you can see, it says Nerissa died in 1940. The reality? She lived until 1986. It said Catherine died in 1961. Nope. She lived all the way until 2014. They were declared dead to the world decades before they actually passed away. Just gone from the public record.
And this quote from the hospital staff just breaks your heart. They said, "The impression I had was that they'd been forgotten." And it seems they really were. When Nerissa died in 1986, apparently no family came. Her funeral was attended only by the hospital staff who cared for her. For a while, her grave was just marked with a plastic tag and a number. Just completely abandoned.
All right, let's fast forward to our time. We're leaving the historical scandals behind and jumping straight into what is without a doubt the biggest royal implosion of the modern era, the Epstein connection. So this timeline really lays it all out. The association between Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein started way back in 1999. And look, even after Epstein pleaded guilty in 2008 to crimes involving a minor, Andrew was still seen with him. That infamous photo of them walking in Central Park was taken in 2010. It all blew up in 2019 with that car crash BBC interview. And from there, it just spiraled. A massive out-of-court settlement with his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, and finally being stripped of pretty much all his titles and duties.
That Newsnight interview was supposed to fix everything for him, but it did the exact opposite. This table shows you why. He'd make a claim, and then evidence would pop up that just completely contradicted it. For instance, he said he had no recollection of ever meeting Virginia Giuffre. But then there's that photo of him with his arm around her when she was 17. He said he cut off contact with Epstein in 2010, but a leaked email from 2011 shows him telling Epstein, "We're in this together." Time after time, his story just didn't line up with the facts.
Okay, those were the big three, for sure. But the story doesn't end there. It's time to open up our mailbag again, because there are a few other lingering controversies that have dogged the royals for years. And this one comes from Chloe in Toronto. Chloe asks, what about other long-running issues I've heard about, like Prince Philip's gaffes or King Charles's political meddling? That's a great question, Chloe, because these two things, while maybe not on the level of the others, really do say a lot about how the monarchy operates. First, let's talk about Prince Philip. He was known for saying a lot of things. His defenders always called them harmless gaffes. Just an old-fashioned guy speaking his mind. But for many others, they weren't gaffes at all. They were just plain racist. I mean, look at some of these. Telling British students in China they'd get slitty eyes if they stayed too long, or asking indigenous Australians if they still throw spears at each other. And this wasn't a one-off thing. It was a pattern that went on for decades. Then you've got King Charles and the infamous Black Spider memos. These were letters he wrote to government ministers when he was still Prince of Wales. They got the nickname from his scrawly handwriting. Now, the whole point of the monarchy is that it's supposed to be politically neutral, but critics said these letters were basically secret lobbying, trying to influence policy on everything from farming to architecture. Some, like the famous architect Richard Rogers, even called it a straight-up abuse of power. So let's take a step back. We've looked at potential treason, heartbreaking family secrets, a huge modern scandal, and decades of controversy. When you put it all together in one place, what's the big picture? What's the pattern here? What does this all tell us about the institution itself? Well, it seems like three themes just keep coming up again and again. First, secrecy. Whether it's burying Nazi files or erasing cousins from the public record, the first instinct is often to hide things. Second, it's all about image management. Protecting the brand, the bloodline, and the institution often comes before anything else, even if it causes immense personal pain. And finally, institutional survival. At the end of the day, the monarchy's #1 job is to protect itself. And when a member becomes a threat to that survival, an existential liability, like Prince Andrew, the system can be incredibly swift and ruthless in cutting them loose. And that brings us to the final huge question at the heart of all this. Is the fact that the monarchy can survive these kinds of scandals a sign of its incredible strength and resilience? Or is it actually a sign of a deep flaw? A flaw in a system that's basically built to shield itself from the kind of accountability that the rest of us have to face? I'll leave that one with you to think about. Thanks so much for joining us on the FAQ Shack.